Alright, so this week I am making the helmet from Metroid. So I used this pepakura file that I found. I will link it down in the video for you guys. And I basically just followed the pattern. I'm using 5mm foam here for this. I made this whole helmet first and then kind of realized that it was too small. So I print the pattern out again and scale it up a bit. So you'll see a little bit later on here that this is it's a different helmet, a little bit bigger than I used floor mat foam for that helmet, just because it was bigger and I wanted it to be a little bit more rigid than this 5mm foam is for something that big. What I'm doing here is this is part of the top part of the helmet. The pepakura file is all kind of one piece for the helmet, but I separated it just so I could fit the pattern on my sheets of foam a lot easier. This gives you a little bit more seams that you have to sand and fill, but it's a lot better to use the foam that you can without wasting it. I always try to make sure my patterns fit on sheets and not use the whole sheet of foam for a pattern. I basically just try to get the most value that I can. So I put those little I guess like the cheek parts on each side, and then I glue the helmet, the right side and left side together. I start in the front and get those together halfway, and then I stick the back together, and then I just work at sticking the middle of the helmet together, because at least that way I know that the helmet fits together completely without having to stretch it. And then this chin piece gets glued together. And then I start to work on the cheek and ear pieces. This is the cheek here. This has got a bevel cut on the back that helps it kind of round over. It kind of rounds over to become like the neck seal part of the helmet. So I cut a V out of the back. And then you can glue that together to give you that bevel piece there. And then this is part of the ear piece. What I did is I cut the top a little bit longer so that I could glue it to the side there. And then that gets like a little foam circle behind it. That piece itself gets the same type of V cut in the back, just to kind of help the cheek and jawline become one piece. It helps it bend in a way that kind of defines the jaw. So with both sides of those on here, I take this little piece here, and this makes the bottom of the chin. You glue both of those together, and then these little circle pieces go behind. These become like the vents. Now this is the ear piece. These darts get glued together to make this like round, like ear, like it's almost like a ear muff, like for the for like snow and stuff. Those old style like ear muffs. And this gets glued onto the back of that, or the top of that side piece there. And then this vent gets glued behind it, and then glued to the top of that there to make that vent cover. Then that whole thing gets glued to the side of the helmet. I start here in this corner for this cheek vent. Make sure that that corner is in good, and that seam line gets lined up with the other seam line, and then I kind of squeeze and round that over to the front to match up the front there. Then you can worry about getting the earpiece lined up with the side of the helmet, and then that piece gets glued on the back. Then I put this the vent for the front. I just glue that in. It's a thinner piece of foam, so I glue it towards the back so it looks like it's got depth to it. And then I ended up adding some 2mm foam panels on the front of that for the actual vent later on. That front vent's also got kind of a V shape too, so you can cut the back of that out. So here is the bigger version of the helmet. The only thing that's different is the foam I used and the size, and those front cheek pieces a little bit more square. So now what I'm doing is I cut some circles out with some PVC pipe, and those are getting glued on the vent panels, the front vent panels. This is some tubing that's used to run wire through. It covers electrical wire. Bought this at Harbor Freight, pretty cheap, and I use that for the vent pieces later on. This is my soldering iron. I have this wood burning tip for it, and I am following all of the pattern, the panel lines around the helmet, slowly cutting them open. I always wear a respirator when I'm doing this because the burning foam fumes are really bad, and they're also pretty dangerous, so I always wear my respirator when I'm doing that. It's just a good, quick, easy way to do panel lines if they're thick panel lines. You see me do a lot of the X-Acto knife with the heat gun for panel lines, but if the panel lines are supposed to be wider, then that really is the best way to do it. Now I'm using some plumbing caulk and just filling in some of those gaps. I covered it with 3 coats of gray Plasti Dip. Now I'm using some of this red spray paint, and I put about maybe three coats of that on, 3 light coats. Just kind of keep building it up slowly. Now for the visor, I am using a Mountain Dew bottle because that is the cheapest, best green plastic I could think of without ordering something or trying to tint or dye plastic, and that actually worked out really good. So just a 2-liter Mountain Dew bottle. I take the visor pattern, trace it on there, and I cut this out bigger than the actual panel. Take my X-Acto knife and I score a center line through the visor, and then I fold that because the visor has a center peak kind of like that, so that's what I'm trying to get it to look like. Now I use sandpaper, and in that outer line where the visor is bigger, I rough that up so the glue will stick to it. So now I'm taking that tube and I'm cutting 2 pieces out of that. And the way I try to do this is I try to get the tube opens up so it's easier to put the wires in. So I'm trying to put that towards the back so you don't see the seam. So then I stick those both in there like that, and they get glued in. The panel lines, I take a little bit of black paint and I rub in there and wipe it off, just so you see those panels a little bit better. Then I take some silver paint and I'm just putting that on in places that I would think would get scraped or bumped or, you know, rub against stuff, just to give it a little bit of depth, make it look a little bit worn and used. And that is it for the build, you guys. Hope you guys really like it. This was a commission job for a family friend. Parker, if you're watching, I hope you liked seeing how I made that helmet for you. It was really fun, and I hope you like it. And I will see you guys next week.